Good morning, everybody. Pastor Vicki, and as you see, it's Pastor John here with us today for this week's Discover Verb. All right, so we're wrapping up the Blueprint Sermon Series this week. And we've talked throughout this series how God has a plan for each of us, and that there are storms, earthquakes that arise, and we're not going to be able to avoid them, so we know how to be prepared. And now, as you wrap up this series to encourage us to go forth, you direct us to Psalm 23.
Yes.
Why?
That's a great question. No, like you said, we've spent 4 weeks talking about God's plans, His promises, purposes for our life, and how we can respond or put that into action. And as I was kind of thinking how we wrap all this up, I guess I was gravitating to Psalm 23 because for me it's like, okay, after 4 weeks, we're ready to go, right? We know everything we need to do. We're going to start building our life off God's blueprints, and everything's going to be good, right? Well, no, even as we said last week, there are life quakes, there are things that happen. But really, for me, the question this week was, what happens when things don't go according to my plans? What happens when things don't go the way that I want to go? What does God have to say about that? What's His blueprint for us? And that's where Psalm 23 really came in, because it reminded me that God, in the midst of all of this, all these other plans and purposes, God is always and will always be our shepherd. And that's where we were.
But what does a shepherd look like in our context in like 2022?
Yeah.
It's a little bit different than back then.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, we're not as accustomed to, what's that. But well, for me, it's a lot of things. And it's all in Psalm 23. I mean, even if you reread it a few times, you see God as shepherd means that there's provision for our lives, like God is providing for us what we need, not the wants necessarily, but even when we're having those hardships, God meets us in our needs as a provider. There's peace, the still waters. He leads us beside still waters. There's peace when we're weary, when we're overwhelmed by our circumstances or our plans not going the way we want. There's protection from that wants to thwart us away from God's plans. He shepherds us and protects us, guides us away from that. There's even just, to me, the shepherd is the promise of His presence. The promise of His presence. We have a companion. We feel loneliness so much, especially when things aren't going the way we want, or hardship or a difficult circumstance. It's so easy to feel isolated and alone. But God as shepherd is a reminder. He's not only providing and protecting, but God is present with us. And for me, that's such a huge reminder.
All right, so my favorite question.
Yeah.
You know what's coming. How does this look like in the 168 of the week? Okay,
so what to do with this week? Yes. I'm going to suggest something for us. It's actually a kind of a struggle for me, but it's an exercise that I've been learning to enjoy more, and it's journaling. So I think our action this week is to journal the goodness, the presence of God that we see every day. Every day, from the smallest details to the biggest circumstances, where are you seeing the goodness of God? I love in Psalm 23, David says, surely your goodness and your mercy will follow me. Well, that's not just for David, but I love that he says surely. He's so confident that God's goodness and God's mercy is present and following him. So we can, this week, by journaling, hopefully have our eyes opened up a little bit more, our hearts filled with the goodness of God that maybe we're not seeing. So let's just journal about it, write it down, share it with other people, and just really celebrate together this goodness that follows us every day.
I like that. And we can journal whether it's a paper journal, whether it's a digital app on our phone or on a computer or a Post-it note even. Whatever that journal looks like for you is that as you see God present, as you see God's blessings in your life, God taking care of you, write it down, give thanks. And you can even share it in the comments and just let us celebrate with you as you see God's presence. So that's encouraging. Thank you for wrapping up this series. And we're moving into Easter season in the next couple of weeks. So we got some good stuff coming for you. You have a great week, and we'll see you in worship.